Welcome to the ICC Crack the Wellness Code Spotlight Session. This is a landmark event in many ways. We have participants from 10 different countries with nearly 500 registrants. Thanks to all of you for making it, and we promise you we'll provide you a very exciting event. Hello, I'm Dr. Srinivas Ramachandra, a vascular surgeon, a CWC doctor patron, and presently the chair of the board of trustees of APIO, which is the American Association of Physicians of Indian origin in the Northern California region, and I'm honored to be your host tonight. As you know, Crack the Wellness Code, or CWC, is a program of the India Community Center. ICC is the largest secular community center of South Asians in all of North America, serving the community for the past 18 years. At CWC, we work with doctors, wellness enthusiasts, health tech professionals, entrepreneurs, health heroes, and a host of others, focusing solely on evidence-based Western and Eastern wellness best practices, with particular emphasis on preventive care, lifestyle medicine, and diet. We've attained global outreach, and we're now scaling further with the help of technology partnerships, dedicated service providers, and our ever-expanding wellness ecosystem. You must have seen the slides rolling earlier that highlighted the accomplishments of our wellness movement. CWC continues to invest in technology to support our 12 programs, 60 plus yearly events with over 100 dedicated volunteers, 80 plus doctors who have helped us launch this enormous wellness movement. I particularly want to recognize the founders of this movement, Mr. Naren Bakshi, Dr. Pankaj Vij, who is one of the panelists today, and Somnath Chatterjee, without whom none of this would happen. And we've come a long way since the inception of this program. Well, then came COVID. The world turned upside down with COVID. Health and well-being became paramount in a way that even launched us to a higher sphere as far as CWC is concerned. We were on steroids with the number of programs that were organized during the course of last year. And the whole world went on a survival mode, not just physical, but mental and emotional well-being. And maybe I should pause for a moment to pray for all of our friends and family and all others in India and pretty much the entire world, which is going through a very, very difficult time now as we're gathered here for this wellness group. Today's topic, consciousness dialogue, recharging the well-being, couldn't have come at a more relevant or timely manner. And coming from an iconic speaker, it is going to be a real treat for all of us. Dr. Tony Nader, our lead speaker, is an intellectual giant and a renowned well-being practitioner with a global following. And he is the head of the Maharishi Foundation. He will be followed by a panel of eminent scholars and experts in this space, and I'll invite the panelists to share their observation and give their opinions and perhaps even quiz Dr. Nader. And we'll have a Q&A session after that, and I would encourage the participants to please post your questions on the chat box for Dr. Nader or any of the panelists, and we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. And I'm looking forward to a super exciting event. And so will you. I'm now going to invite our own Dr. Sachin Deshmukh, who's been associated with Dr. Nader for a long time, and I'll give him the honor of introducing Dr. Nader to us this evening. For those of you that don't know Dr. Sachin Deshmukh, he's been with the CWC almost since the inception, and he was recently recognized through the Yoga Alliance, listen to this, for being a special experienced teacher in a special pathway. This is for yoga teachers with extensive teaching and training expertise, which far exceeds their minimum requirements. He has, believe this or not, over 3,000 hours of training, 30 plus years of teaching experience, and has completed over 40,000 hours of teaching in multiple modalities. Above all, he has also proved to be one of the most dedicated volunteers for CWC, clocking over 500 hours of service. A big thank you from all of us at CWC, and over to you now, Sachin, to please introduce Dr. Nader.
Thank you, Ram. So, welcome everyone to this wonderful session. Everybody probably heard of Dr. Nader before. He's been with us before also. So Dr. Tony Nader, he is MD, PhD. He's a trained physician. He was trained at Harvard University and then MIT with a PhD in neuroscience. His training includes internal medicine, psychiatry, and neurology. He was a clinical and research fellow in neurology at Massachusetts General Hospital, also at Harvard Medical School, and he was the assistant director of the Clinical Research Center at MIT. Dr. Nader also has conducted research in neurochemistry, neuroendocrinology, relationship between diet, age, behavior, mood, seasonal influences, and neurotransmitter and hormonal activity, and also on the role of neurotransmitter precursors in medicine. His writings also include the relationship between mind and body, consciousness, and physiology. Dr. Nader's book, One Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness, has just been published by Penguin Random House as an ebook and will be coming out later in the year as a printed book. Dr. Nader is a successor of the founder of the TM technique, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. We are extremely fortunate to host him at ICC for the third time. So his first talk in 2012 was on Veda and Ramayana in human physiology, and another session in 2014. And we had full house for both of these programs. And these programs were also supported by our other partners like APIO, South Asian Heart Center, and local TM centers. In 2014, he was invited to Bay Area as a featured lecturer at Stanford University in a course titled Hacking Consciousness. Also in 2014, he was a keynote speaker for our affiliate organization, South Asian Heart Center Annual Gala. Now, on the personal note, when he came for the first time, we were thinking about launching this wellness movement. So we are very delighted that we materialized. Now, third time when he appears with us, I am also very delighted to announce that we are able to launch the long-term vision of us. We just initiated the Indian Wellness Code. So that's the IWC, like CWC, which is functional in India. Then the impact of this Crack the Wellness Code, I can also vouch for myself. It was a life-changing thing for us, not only because we are able to serve others with this purpose. The mission of our Indian Community Center is always been to unite, serve, and celebrate. And then this changed all of our lives. So our goal is to make it a household thing so that everybody should have happiness and bliss in their lives. I also consider myself extremely fortunate to has been able to organize these earlier events with, for Dr. Nader, which introduced him to the Bay Area community and his amazing wisdom showing the scientific reality of the Vedic traditions. I'm personally expecting that his new book, One Bounded Ocean of Consciousness, will open the door for humanity to understand that consciousness is the governing reality of our universe. It is with great pleasure and honor to introduce to Dr. Nader on what that means. So I invite Dr. Tony Nader. So come and join us.
Thank you so much. Namaskar. Thank you, Dr. Sachin, Dr. Ram, and the great panelists and everyone attending for inviting me again. It really warms my heart and inspires me to be with you. You have upheld modern and ancient, modern science and ancient knowledge. And this has been my privilege and honor to work under the great leadership of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi from the Vedic tradition to open my own mind and understand the dimensions of life that are open to us. There is, of course, the physical level. In wellness, we want to have good diet, good exercise, prevent things from disease, balanced nutrition, live in accordance with the rhythms of nature, and live a life that is in accordance with its purpose, with the goals of life. And life has a meaning, it has a plan, a purpose, it has an understanding from different perspectives. And the ancient knowledge of Veda and Vedic literature offer us very many venues of improving ourselves from the physical as well as the mental. What has been really a discovery for me, and I'd like to share with you briefly this evening and discuss, is the fact that our perception of reality is very relative. When you are sleeping, you have no sense of anything, but your body is detecting all kinds of changes in the environment, inside and outside, and adjusting itself, clearing away stresses and strains and fatigue. But the awareness is very limited. In dream state, we have a state of illusion. The mind goes through visions and aspects that are not real. As we know, the tiger of the dream state cannot be killed by the rifle of the waking state. And the same, the rifle of the waking state cannot do except what is possible to do in the waking state, and vice versa for the dream. So therefore, we have different realities of awareness that we go through in different states of consciousness. Ultimately, in the waking state, we discover that we have different layers of understanding. These layers depend on the alertness of the mind. If we are fully alert, we can see more things. If we are rested, we are able to fathom different details of life and make better choices. So our ability to live a better life also depends on our level of awareness. and at the same time, how much awareness is settled and able to have broad comprehension. And even during the waking state, we examine reality from different perspectives. There is the reality on the sensory level. The sun rises in the east and settles in the west. That's what we see, and that's why many people throughout the ages believe that it's the sun that is moving, whereas the earth is stable, it doesn't move, it is sitting there. So that is the sensory perception. But then there is the intellectual analysis that makes us find that this doesn't fit with what we see as reality in terms of the planetary motions and different calculations. And we find that ultimately it's the Earth that rotates around its axis, creating the illusion that the sun is moving from east to west. Some of the most fundamental aspects of what we call reality are space and time. We see time on the clock flowing very sequentially, and we see space very rigid, very well defined as we defined it in miles or kilometers or meters or inches. And this is very rigid. As scientists went deeper into reality, they found that, in fact, even space and time are relative and depends on the speed at which you are going. And this is not a fantasy. This is something that has been evidence-based, calculated, measured, and tried through satellite functions and through different realities, which is based on, as we know, some of the Einstein's general and special relativity theories that even define gravity in terms of space-time continuum and space-time geometry, and so that space and time are actually connected. As scientists delve deeper into nature, they find that it's not atoms that make reality, but atoms themselves are made out of elementary particles, and the elementary particles are made out of themselves vibrations, fluctuations of fields, and the fields of different forces, with 4 different major forces: the weak, the strong, the gravitational, and the electromagnetic force. And gradually, as they looked deeper into nature, they found more and more unifying values, and these forces are more and more unified to such an extent that today we have a theory of a unified field that is the source of all that is on the surface. So there is actually one field, that is what scientists contemplate, to be the source of all what we see, and that the expressions of this field are vibrations that lead to appearance of atoms and molecules and cells and the body and the nervous system and the environment and society and the whole thing. In the ancient Vedic knowledge, this is the same reality that is being described as there is one field of consciousness, Satchit Ananda, a field of pure being, of pure self, that manifests in the reality of life as all the different expressions. And there is the notion of Maya, which says that everything on the outside is an illusion. Now, this notion of Maya has been actually misinterpreted in some ways, because people think that the illusions that we see in the outside is like really the illusions that we have in the dream. And to some extent, it is true, because our nervous system, our ability to see things, is limited with the limitation of our perception, which means we see only light from red to violet. We don't see infrared, we don't see ultraviolet, except if we use instruments. We don't see the workings of the atoms and the molecules, except if we use a microscope. And even if we go deeper, these are things that we don't have even instruments to analyze, but the scientists have found quantum fields that are completely different than the reality that we seem to assume on the surface level, in which actually particles can be at different places at the same time, that the consciousness of the observer collapses what appears to be the wave function, which is the probability of having a particle in different places, and that there is an interaction between the observer, the process of observation, and the object being observed. These things are baffling scientists, and they are making really the scientists open their awareness to realities that they have never imagined before. This brings us back to what is true reality. Having researched true reality, many physicists, the top physicists in the world, those who have discovered these fields, such as Schrödinger and Planck and the top scientists in the world, if you read what they say that having researched the physical reality in life, in their life, they found that actually at the basis of all that is physical, there is something that is not physical. And they seem to believe, and they say it, that it is consciousness. So this brings us back to a very important aspect of something we have assumed to be true all through, because our senses have shown us this, and that is, it is matter that is the source of everything. Even scientists started to believe that it's the matter that is the source of consciousness, and in the past 25 years, they have been really trying to find a theory, a way, a system that could explain that, but it's completely unsuccessful. There is not even a hint in science today of how consciousness emerges from something physical. And there is a good reason for that. It's because it does not. In fact, it is the physical that emerges from consciousness. And this is where the ancient Veda describes it as Maya. But Maya doesn't mean that the physical, the material is an illusion. Maya means that the physical and the material are made out of consciousness, but they appear to us as being something physical and material. Now, this is a radical, kind of unusual explanation. One can say, but the table is real, the chair is real, the stars, the planets are real. Yes, they are real, but they are real from a certain level of perception. From the sensory level, they feel like that. From the intellectual level, they are different. If you use different instruments and you dive deeper into reality, you find that you have a different reality. So we are seeing things from a very narrow, small perspective when we look at them only through the senses. The reality is that consciousness is all there is. Consciousness is the reality that manifests as the infinite diversity of the universe. And this is, of course, not something new. It has been mentioned as part of the Advaita Vedanta. So in the Vedantic literature, consciousness is described as one reality. Many philosophers and thinkers throughout the ages have also come to this conclusion, even modern scientists, as we have said. In the Greeks, Parmenides, in the modern times, you have Spinoza, you have different people who have said that this is the reality. Now, how can this be? This is the main question. And this is what I have spent my life researching under the guidance of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And one of the things that I have had the honor and pleasure to present to the ICC and to the Honorable Dr. Sachin and all the others with him is the relationship between the dynamics of consciousness, which is available in the Veda, and the actual physical structure of the body, and have shown a one-to-one correlation between how consciousness manifests and how the body is constructed, showing that there is one set of dynamics, of laws of nature that manifest on the level of awareness, on the mind, on consciousness, and it's the same natural laws of nature that manifest in the physical body. The question remained, how is this possible? Because it is a hard problem. This can sound like a theory that is based on belief. You have to believe in it because it is like that. And so that is not satisfying. We want to see if it makes sense. We want to see if it works. We want to see how the one consciousness manifests as the multiplicity of creation, how the unmanifest field of pure being appears in so many multiple, infinite number of forms. And this is what I describe in this book, One Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness, that I hope you will find interesting and go through it. It describes that actually consciousness is one field, but because it is conscious, it generates three perspectives on itself. These three perspectives are the perspectives of the observer, the observed, and the process of observation. So to be conscious, you have to be conscious of something. And that thing is an object. The observer, the seer, the knower is the observer, is the conscious individual being conscious. And there is something that connects the individual observer to the object of observation. And that is the link between the observer and the object, and that is the process of observing. What this generates is a point of view, a perspective on consciousness, which is one field, yet because of its nature of being conscious, it generates three flavors within the one field of consciousness. Now, these flavors have their own perspectives. So you can now look at reality from the perspective of the observer, from the perspective of the process of observation, or from the perspective of the object of observation. And these new perspectives generate layers and layers of perspectives, which I call a cascade of perspectives. And that leads to an infinite number of perspectives. So in the unmanifest field of life, there is a field of all possibility. And that field of all possibilities is all a field of perspective, of point of view, of it being able to look at itself from all these different cascades of possible perspectives. Then something happens that allows this multiple, infinite number of perspectives to actually manifest. And that is another hurdle to solve, and something that is also explained, and it needs some steps of understanding and steps of logic, which are explained in that book, that show how from the unmanifest field of all possibilities, manifestation actually emerges. And so the logic is very, very solid, and it is testable. It is also testable because we have technologies of consciousness that allows us to change the physiology through mental procedures. And these technologies come from the Vedic tradition also, such as transcendental meditation, as brought to light by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, that allows the mind to settle down towards that unified field that we talked about and experience pure consciousness, which is the source of the self. And the reason a human being can do that is because it has within it all the dynamics of consciousness. And that brings us back to the research of Veda and Vedic literature in the human physiology, which is another topic that I had the pleasure to present to the audience in 2012 and 2014, as I have been reminded, which was a wonderful time to be with you. Basically, what I'm saying is there is one field, one unbounded field of pure consciousness. That field, which is not physical and not material, is a field of all possibilities, reflecting on itself, curving back on itself, prakritim swam avashtabhya visrijami puna puna. Curving back onto myself, I create again and again and again. And that is perspective upon perspective upon perspective. And of course, during this short time, the presentation does not allow me to go into greater detail, and it might appear a bit abstract. But the reality is to share with you that actually consciousness is primary. And consciousness is what appears as matter. Matter is real from different levels of perspectives. It is real on some level. It is more deeply real on a different level. On a different level, it can be seen to be forces and fields. On a deeper level, it can be seen as one unified field. And on a deeper level, it is found to be pure consciousness. If you practice transcendental meditation through this mental technique, you get changes in the physiology. Through consciousness, you have a transformation in the way the nervous system works, and you see that there is greater coherence, that there is greater ability to connect between right side, left side, front side, and back side of the brain. And these are evidence-based, studied research with researchers and published in the best journals with peer reviews and repeated many times that show that actually there is a transformation in the nervous system's functioning which influences the way the whole body works through what we call the neuroendocrine axis, which is the nervous system influencing the hormonal system. The hormonal system is the system that influences the entire functioning of the body's metabolism and different functions of growth and development, and through that to influence the immune system. So there is a direct also connection and testability on that level, and we have also shown that when a group of people practices this program together, there are changes in society, so that goes beyond just the physical limitations of the individual body. They change actually the structure and functioning of society. And these studies also has been repeated many times that show that whenever a group large enough practices these programs together, which means bring their awareness to a deep level within themselves of consciousness, they are influencing what we call the collective consciousness of society. And as the collective consciousness of society rises and is awakened and is more rested, it is less stressed. And therefore, as a result, you have less crime, less conflicts, less problems, improvement in social indicators, improvement in economy. And this again has been repeated many times and has been also published in peer-reviewed research papers and journals that again shows how important consciousness is, and that is actually through consciousness that we can create individual well-being, because on the personal level there is decreased anxiety, decreased depression, there is improvement in all levels of performance, better sleep, a reduction in bad behavior, better relationships. And when I'm saying these just like that, it's not just to throw, words, but every one of these words have been studied scientifically and repeatedly with control groups and compared to other techniques that shows that life truly can blossom to be lived on the full value, where we can say truly aham brahmasmi, I am totality, I am wholeness, because sarvam kalvidam brahm, everything is wholeness, everything is totality. And that is the true nature of life. For me, that was a huge discovery of understanding, guided by Maharishi, and then my research on this field with his guidance, showing really that the other aspect of understanding, the understanding that it's the physical matter that is primary, the understanding that material value is primary, this is where the illusion is. This is where the true Maya is. So without rejecting matter, we know that matter is an experience in consciousness, and that it simply appears as such because of our limitation in our physical apparatus. But our physical apparatus is pure enough, good enough, basically well enough if we remove the stresses and strains and distortions from it, that it can transcend, which means go beyond and experience pure consciousness, experience the one unbounded field of consciousness which is within us, and know that we are totality, we are Brahman, we are wholeness. And that is the true essence of life, that is the true course of life and the true goal of life. What this allows us to do is answer many, many fundamental questions in life that have not been fully answered yet throughout modern history and ancient times. Of course, there are the rules and guidance in different levels, but the problems about freedom and determinism, are we truly free? Are we determined by the laws of nature? Is destiny and fate are on top of us, or we have a choice to make a difference? The cause for suffering, where is the origin of evil, why there is evil? And these are very important questions that we can answer in a way that allows us to surmount them, the difficulties, and understand the true purpose of life, which is to grow in enlightenment and to grow in bliss and happiness. But we have to really have a foundation in order to be able to understand this fully. And this foundation is the original, the primary assumption that we have is, in the modern times, is wrong, that everything is material, everything is physical. This is the Maya. The reality, consciousness is the primary value. It is consciousness that manages the appearance and allows itself to appear as different values. And therefore, working from the field of consciousness, we have the ability to really transform life. Working on the surface level, all we find is differences and difficulties and people fighting each other because of differences, because they forget that the sap in the tree is what creates the branches, the leaves, the flowers, the petals, and all that is in the tree, and the fruits ultimately come from the sap which is in the field. It is hidden in the roots. And the roots of life, the field of life, is pure consciousness. And this is what creates all the beautiful diversity that can be truly harmonious and truly create perfection in life if we nourish the sap, if we water the root of life. You water the root of the tree, which are hidden, and you enjoy all the fruits of the tree. You enjoy the fullness of the tree. So if you forget the roots, then the tree will fall apart and you don't have what you want to have. And so therefore, there is a technology that comes with this knowledge, a technology of consciousness that allows us to develop the full potential of life, remove the stresses and strains on the individual level, and find unity at the basis of diversity, so that all differences are here to nourish life and to allow life to blossom in its variety and its beauty and its richness of diversity. But then we find that we are all ultimately one consciousness, and therefore that is the basis of unity. And this is not enough to do just on an intellectual level. It is something one can experience. One can actually experience directly through one's awareness and flourish in oneself and make it flourish in society. So it is a great joy to be with you. Our thoughts are, as Dr. Ram also said, with all those who today face difficulties, in particular, of course, in India today, at this time, it is very acute. Our love and feelings and prayers and support from all fields of life go with all that is happening, and hoping and wishing and knowing that it will be overcome and life will come back, and hope that there will be no suffering anymore and this pandemic is resolved as soon as possible, particularly for India this time, but of course for the whole world, for every family and for every parent, every brother and sister and mother and grandmother and child and grandchild who have suffered directly or indirectly. Our thoughts are with them, and we know that if we improve consciousness and awareness, then we will have quick solutions, better decision making, because we can be acting in the light. Whereas if we are not in higher level of consciousness, we are acting as if we are in the darkness and we don't see the solutions. Often they are right there in front of us. Thank you very much. And it's my joy to be with you. And thank you again. I'm happy to be quizzed or answer any question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nader. That was amazing. You took us to a totally different world out there. And I'd be curious to get the observations from our panelists, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. There are quite a few questions already in the chat box. So let me invite Gopi Kalayel to be our first panelist speaker to give his thoughts and observations, and gives you an opportunity to take us into the world that Dr. Nader took us to.
Thank you, Dr. Ramachandran, and thank you, Dr. Nader, for an absolutely fascinating talk. So I have three observations based on what you said, and these are really my three takeaways. And the first one is there is a unified theory of consciousness, and it was established or talked about in Vedic sciences, but there is now a more modern scientific interpretations, or different fields of scientific observation are coming to the same conclusion. The second thing that I took away from your talk is that you can tie it back to practical everyday living, everyday wisdom, and even find solutions to our day-to-day problems. And you talked of meditation as a way of finding harmony within the individual body, and just allowing your body, brain, breath, and so to speak, consciousness to be in harmony. And the third thing you said in terms of tying it back to everyday practical wisdom and living is how when people are connected with this unified theory of consciousness, there is more harmony at a social layer. And the third thing that I took away that is very heartening is how much of scientific evidence-based research now exists to what has always existed in the ancient wisdom traditions. But for a lot of people, it only becomes accessible if it is backed by scientific traditions. So, Dr. Nader, yeah, the three questions, and I'll just lay all three of them, and you can answer them somewhere along the course of the next few minutes. The first is that give me some practical 3 to 5 steps on how do I use this theory for my well-being, for my happiness. So that would be my first question. Do you have a way of summarizing it into a few tips? People always like leaving a talk with saying, here are some things they can apply. The second question I had was, you mentioned your book is called One Unified Ocean of Consciousness, which is fantastic. And how do you use that to explain the sense of separation that exists in the human condition? Why do we otherize others? Why is there acquisitiveness, competitiveness, if it is one unified ocean of consciousness? And in the extreme case, why is there violence between human beings? Is the question that I often ponder about. And my third question is this. You are a physician, and physicians operate in the realm of the observable universe, the body, the brain, and to some extent psychology, emotions, thoughts, etc. The minute you talk about consciousness, it gets into metaphysical, and a lot of people could dismiss it as woo-woo. And I'm sure you face that during your talks. How do you reconcile the two and take what this concept of consciousness and tie it back to modern day scientific fields like medicine and physics, etc. Thank you. Thank you for a fascinating talk. Very thought-provoking.
Wonderful. I'm very impressed with your summary. Just 3-4 words, and you said it all. I felt like I might have been rambling when I heard your beautiful summary. But it is necessary sometimes to, of course, expound on some points so that we see it as really not just a dogma, but there is some logic to it. Recharging the well-being happens when you give a chance to the physiology to clear itself from its own stresses and strains. We are free, and this is one of the aspects that are important in the equation of decision-making and reasons why there are problems, which comes in the second question. But our freedom allows us to make choices that sometimes are not ideal because we don't have the full understanding and the full awareness of where to go and what to do, what to eat, what relations to have, what business to create, when to rest, when to work, etc. And so there are these factors that enter in due to our freedom. And because we have freedom, we can make even wrong decisions. So freedom has two sides to it. We are not robots, we are free individuals. And when we make a wrong decision, we accumulate stress and strain, be it physical or mental, as we can look at it from physical being the body and mental being the mind and what we are calling consciousness, although we are saying that even the body itself is consciousness, but this we can hold on for a little while. So truly, what to do? First, follow a good routine, take care of your body, of your physiology, of proper nutrition, things that you know are good, and make decisions when you are rested. Don't make decisions when you are tired, when you are fearful or exhausted. Take a time off, take a time back, and know that everything is relative, that things can happen, but that you can change them, that the purpose of life is to grow in happiness and therefore be full of hope. And most importantly, practice transcendental meditation. Of course, that's the technique we teach in our organization, but we teach it and we do it not because we are just having a business or something like that, because we believe in it, because we have tried it, because it has been successful, it has been shown to work. And what it does is allow the mind to rest. As the mind rests, the body rests, and when the body rests, it gets rid of its stresses and strains. And we have seen the removal of stress and leading to a better functioning of the physiology. So everything is reversible. Practice these techniques regularly, have a good routine in general as general points, and you will see that life will grow in fullness. You are clearer in your thinking, you make better decisions, and then you are exposed to less stress as you grow. The separation, the competition, the violence we see in society is again due to fear and misunderstanding and bad decisions. It brings us back to this feeling and this idea of freedom. Now, consciousness is all there is, but we talked about the unmanifest field of all possibilities. But I didn't go because the time doesn't allow, and how the unmanifest manifests. And what you will find in the book is that one of the key factors in the process of manifestation that actually lead to manifestation is freedom. Freedom of the individual perspectives to be what they are as individual entities rather than purely the unbounded ocean of consciousness. So it is the ocean of consciousness that creates the waves. So imagine there is a big ocean and there are the waves. And so the ocean is settled in its depths. And as you go up and up, you have more and more excitation. On the surface of the ocean, you have the waves. And these individual waves, of course, the analogy stops here in a sense, they have their own freedom. And we are those waves, the atoms are those waves on a limited level, the different values of reality are on a different level. And based on their understanding, based on the quality of their consciousness, on their connectedness with the source, they have either limited or broad ability to understand and make the right decisions. And therefore, there is possibilities of clashing, of violence, because of lack of knowledge, because lack of understanding, because of lower consciousness. And therefore, the outer value of seeing the things from the surface creates a sense of duality, and duality is a source of fear, because the other can take away what I have, or the other cannot allow me to live my principles and my life. And so you get into these phenomena which create possibilities for violence. And if action is against the laws of nature, then there is, as you sow, so shall you reap. That is a law of nature also, action and reaction. And therefore, one gets oneself into these vicious circles of violence, and then things happen that are not fulfilling. And that is what needs to be arrested and stopped by going back to the source and going back to consciousness, awareness, broadening one's awareness, and having a better decision making, so one doesn't create the wrong things in order to get the wrong results and find oneself in situations of violence and complications. Now, consciousness is metaphysical in a sense, yes, it is, but as we go to the reality of the physical, we find that it is made out of a field. So matter is made out of energy. Energy is made of energy fields. The different fields are being more and more unified. So even on the physical level, we find that on the physical analysis of the source of the physical, we find that one field is the reality. So one step more takes us to this level of consciousness that actually makes our physical body patterns and modes of consciousness. Now, this is a very complex and complicated, I have to admit, concept if we look at it just like that. Like the body, what is the body? The body is made out of molecules, molecules made out of atoms, atoms made out of particles. What are the particles? The particles are fluctuations and excitations of fields of energy. And the fields of energy are themselves unified on a deeper level. So if you go to the source of the reality of things, you find a unified value. What we are saying is just one step more. It's not like a huge step. It's one step, that this field is consciousness. Now, it appears in all these different layers, and these layers on their own are real. It's like you have a bracelet that is made out of gold. You have a ring that is made out of gold. You have a necklace that is made out of gold. You have a statue that is made out of gold. They are different, but they are all gold. So there is no contradiction. The fact that the statue or the bracelet are different from the ring, they are different, but their essence is the same. It's gold. It's just made out of gold. So that's what we are saying. We're not negating the differences on the surface, and we're not negating the fact that you can melt the bracelet and make it into a necklace. The same gold can look different, can be different. And therefore, if the necklace is also distorted, you can fix it on the surface. So as a doctor, we can fix things on the surface. It's not negation of that aspect of reality and the need to work on that level of reality, but it is an acknowledgement of the essence that is at the basis of all that is on the surface. And if we are not in touch with that essence, if we lose the reality that is at the essence and we start acting on the surface, then we are lost into considerations and differences that can create problems, which can be fixed on the surface, but can also be fixed from the essential value of the value that upholds and maintains other values.
Thank you, Dr. Nader.
let me invite Dr. Bridge.
Thank you, Ram. I'll keep it brief because we want to get to audience questions too. So the things that really jumped out for me that I can definitely relate to are, number one, that our alertness and our awareness determines the quality of our life. And I can certainly relate to that because my perception changes depending on my own alertness and awareness, how well I'm rested, how well I'm taking care of myself, and so on and so forth. Number two, the unified field is the source of all that we see. And I can definitely relate to that. And the third part that is my key takeaway from this whole session is that when we water the root, we can feed the sap. And that feeds the whole tree, the leaves, the fruits, the flowers, everything that we enjoy is all coming from the same source. I have a lot of questions, but I'll summarize into sort of one so that we can keep the program moving quickly. And it is that, yes, we say that time, space are relative, but the 5 o'clock train leaves on time. And how do you tie that all in? If I smash my hand in the door of my car, my thumb becomes blue. I can fracture my thumb. As I get older, my hair goes gray. I might need a hip replacement or a knee replacement. That's not Maya, that's not illusion. Those are real things in the physical being that are happening. So how do I tie that in? And then, on a larger scale, we can delve into, when you talk about meaning, that life has a meaning, what's the meaning of all this death and devastation that we're seeing all around us in the past year? Young people, children, grandparents. I guess that was more than one question, so I'll stop right there. Thank you.
We do not negate the surface value. As we said, the necklace can get distorted. It can be not pure anymore. It can be mixed up. It can not function. It's not beautiful anymore, and you can fix it on the surface level. So it is possible that we can create an action on the surface level that distorts things, and things can age, can change. There is a change and modification, and that these are processes that happen. There is no question about it. And so what we're saying is that, in fact, what I'm explaining about Maya is that the interpretation of Maya has been not complete by many thinkers, that Maya, everything is an illusion, that your hair getting gray is an illusion. It's not an illusion, it's real. It's real. What is the Maya is that this hair is not made of the same essence ultimately as all other aspects in creation. And again, the example of the gold comes here to illustrate, to some extent, all examples and analogies have their limitations, and that is the different aspects. It's like looking for the substance of life, and that substance is not material. That's what we're saying. But it appears as matter, there is no question, and it manifests like that, and there is a reality of it on that level, and you can deal with it on that level also, and work with it on that level. So that's why one says you have to eat properly, to be careful not to get into an accident. You have to live life on the surface level. If there is a surgery that it's needed, you need to do the surgery. If there is something, these are the things that are to be done on that level of reality. But as you said beautifully also, and there is an essence that can nourish the tree, that can nourish. So you can, you can trim the branches, you can clean them up, but if you forget to water the root of the tree, then your surface action is not fulfilling. What is the reason for all the suffering? Well, unfathomable is the field of karma, and it is very difficult to decide for each individual case what are the reasons. One has to really look into one's own life. How did the pandemic influence me personally? Why would it be like this? And sometimes you don't find the logical reasons. But one thing is sure, if the collective consciousness of the world does the right decisions, lives in harmony, is raised and there is more clarity in the thinking and the behaving and the decision making, then these things are more limited, and the decisions are in the direction to prevent the dangers before they arise. And so there is responsibility, but it is not the time to talk of responsibility. It's the time to be compassionate, to be loving, to support, and to admit that there are these values that happen, that on the individual level, you cannot fully understand why an individual is going through what they're going. Maybe they can tell themselves, or maybe they don't have the ability to tell. And that is, again, a question of awareness, how much you know about yourself, your reality, the expanse of your life, the depths of your being, your past, your present, your future. So there are different states of consciousness, and there are different layers of awareness.
Let me invite Dr. Jay Kumar now with his observations and questions for Dr. Nader.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nader, for this excellent talk. And I want to just say, you could have talked for much longer, and I think it'd be nice for you to know that I actually teach the entire university course exactly on this topic called Quantum Theory, Eastern Cosmology, and Consciousness. And I would like to, in the way that Gopi did as well, I'm going to just observe 3 points that I think you excellently stated in my own language. I published a paper in the Journal of Cosmology that looks at the Upanishads, and looks at the Upanishads as the connection between quantum mechanics and quantum principles of the Upanishads. And in many ways, it's going to affirm what you wonderfully stated. And I'll put the link actually to this free article in the chat for everyone to have access to. And it really is this. With regard to quantum theory, I propose that the teachings of the Upanishads can be summarized into centering around 3 key points. Number 1, there exists a transcendental, infinite, non-local, dimensionless, unchanging reality that is obscured from the limited cognitive perception of the human senses. Number 2, this foundational reality is veiled by means of a cognitive illusion that limits consciousness into a localized, linear, and dimensionally finite perception of space and time. Number 3, advanced mental trainings were developed and practiced in order to liberate one's consciousness from the illusory cognitive limitations of the mind via a perceptual reframing of space and time into its fundamental non-local entangled state. And so why I'm stating these 3 observations that I published in this article is that it's I think it's wonderful, I think, for our audience to know that many of the pioneers in quantum mechanics, Schrödinger, Bohr, etc., when they were formulating their theories around quantum mechanics, like the quantum field, the collapse of the wave function, they were going into the Upanishads and using analogies and passages from the Upanishads in their written correspondences. So the quantum field is Brahman. The idea of cognitive filtration is Maya. The idea of Atman and Brahman is complementarity. And so it's wonderful to see that quantum mechanics, which is probably the most remarkable advancement in the sciences in probably the past, in physics at least, the past 100 years, solidly has a grounding in Vedic philosophy and teachings. The one question I have for you, I'm gonna keep it short, we have Q&A. We both have a fascination in neuroscience and the brain and consciousness. I like to think, and maybe you can agree with me, do you believe that when we talk about consciousness in the Western perspective, it's really conscious with a small c? And when we talk about consciousness from the Vedic perspective, it's the capital C. And so I think we need to be very aware that when we're talking about consciousness, there's a confusion in the Western scientific mind, and I think you can probably speak to this, that looks at consciousness through this small c term. So one question I have is, as someone with brain science expertise that you have as well, do you think that there are neural processes in the brain that limit or in some way obscure this or veil this dimensional state? And do you think that if the human brain or psyche were to have this full access, would it be too overwhelming for the human brain to process? Do you think our nervous system would go into overload? Do you think that it would be able to even handle getting a glimpse in the same way that Arjuna got a glimpse of Krishna in his divine form? It overwhelmed him. Do you think that would be the same case for us?
If we are not prepared, of course, it can be overwhelming. There is no question. And that's why evolution happens in a soft way. By the way, congratulations on the paper. This is really wonderful. The points you brought up are just right on the money, as they say in the West. And it's really beautiful. Yes, evolution has to happen in a sequential way. And ultimately, Arjuna gets enlightened. He gets smriti labdha. He remembers. His memory comes back. But he had to go through the process. And Arjuna was already very enlightened. And even him, he had to go through this process. And he couldn't fathom the absolute infinite possibilities that are within the absolute and manifest pure being that Krishna showed him, in this amazing chapter where he opens his mouth and the whole thing appears. And that is the field of the divine possibilities that are there in the absolute field of pure being. And as you say beautifully, individuals have access to a limited awareness. As we grow, we get higher states of consciousness, ultimately reaching unity consciousness, where we can understand the true value of Aham Brahmasmi on an experiential level, Vedoham on an experiential level, not just on an intellectual analysis level. But that is a process, and the process requires corrections in the nervous system structure and mode of functioning. I call them the patterns, networks, and modes of functioning of the complex consciousness as it manifests through the nervous system.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your response. I'll leave it there because I know we have lots of Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, having two neuroscience people go at it, I'm pretty sure you could spend the next few hours on this one and taking it to a much higher level. I do want to bring it down to our level, that of a surgeon and an average person, non-neuroscience person, not meaning to open a can of worms here. Do you see any correlation with our belief system or religion in any of this one?
Well, I address this briefly in the book, and I refer to the book because it is unfair that we answer these huge questions in a 2-minute answer, but one has to give some answer. And the answer to this is, it can be completely scientifically perceived, in which an atheist, a monotheist, polytheist, a monist, a dualist can find truth. It sounds unbelievable, but actually it's true. And the difference is, it's a question of perception. It's a question of perspective. On which level of reality you put yourself. If you put yourself on the level of oneness that is totally transcendental, which is true because that is what consciousness is. It's a transcendental reality, and we call it transcendental, and the transcendental value is there. Then your belief system will say, well, I want to call this God, and God is transcendental. So don't give God a picture, don't give God anything. It's beyond everything. You cannot imagine. He's more than anything. And that's what it is. Now you can take the Buddhist perspective that there is no self, it's one field and that's one consciousness, then also it works. Now you can say, no, I want to call it God, but it has a personal value. And because it has these three values, and I saw one of the questions pass as we were saying, can we say this is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit in consciousness and Christianity? And yes, we can, sure we can. You can say the Father is the observer, silent witness, the process is the Holy Spirit, and the Son is the object, the incarnation. So you can look at that. So there is no contradiction with the fact that God is also transcendental. You can say that since consciousness is all there is, therefore there are creatures that are more evolved than humans, and they are consciousness. So you can say if you call consciousness God, therefore these are also God. So it's not monotheism, it's polytheism. And yet, if you look at Hinduism and in depth, you find that actually it's also a monotheistic in a sense, because when Krishna says, when you go to all these values, you're actually going to me, and I am the one, I am the only one, the reality, and all of these are my expressions. So if you look at the sun and say the sun is a divine reality, and you are then called you're an animist, you live in Africa or in some parts of Asia, and or even in some ways of looking at it from Indian perspective, that this is Surya, the sun, and that is God, then fine, it is God. It is the expression of consciousness in that form, which has this form, this ability, this quality. So it's a question truly of perspective. And when you look at it from its essence, you find that there is no contradiction. There is really no contradiction. It's a question of point of view on the same thing looked at with different words, different nomenclature, different definitions, but the whole reality is there, and you can see unity at the basis of it. So I don't go through the religious part in the book because I want to avoid complications of discussions.
I hope I didn't open a can of worms, but you did set the stage for a total webinar just on that topic for the future. Thank you so much. I do want to move on and take questions from the participants, but before that, I want to acknowledge that this kind of quality programming that CWC has been able to provide requires support from a lot of people. And a couple of the key partners in this venture, one of which is the physician community, mostly represented by APIO, the American Association of Physicians of Indian Origin. I have the pleasure of now inviting the incoming president of this organization, who happens to be a neurologist, but I hope he doesn't delve into more neuroscience. But let me recognize Dr. Raj Gupta, who is here in the audience. Raj, you can unmute yourself and tell us what you think about our partnership with CWC.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ramachandran. It's truly a very humbling experience to hear from the wisdom from Dr. Tony Nader and others in the panel. And I want to affirm it. We are representing APIO, which was established in 1983. We are a group of about 800 physicians. And my role as a leader, as everybody else is saying, we will be very collaborative. We will have synergistic relationship with both CWC and ICC. So I'm getting something, I want to make it better, and I want to cement it further. We all stand for unity in diversity, and that will be my message.
Great, thank you so much. We look forward to continuing participation from APIO and the membership. Now, this may be an opportunity to take on a few questions Let me start with this saying, how can TM be made affordable and offered to masses to improve their health and reduce social evil?
We are trying our best. Our teachers are really devoted. They also have to live, and we would be very happy to teach TM for free if the teachers are supported. So it's just a system that requires personal attention. We have created a new app now to help a little bit that you can learn in person because it requires a personal attention. And more and more, there is a possibility that insurance companies offer support and cover it so that the teachers can actually themselves continue to live and and be able to teach. But there are many programs. We have veteran programs, and the veteran administration has been absolutely great with great supporters. We have programs for schools with the David Lynch Foundation. We have Maharishi International University that offers scholarships. And we are trying in every way to make it available to the maximum number of people.
Great. And one other question, somewhat provocative, but in the context of COVID, how can we explain that coronavirus is a manifestation of consciousness? Shouldn't consciousness be more benevolent?
It is, when you look at it very carefully and you see, you go through the logic, honestly, as again described in sequence in the book, you find that there is a freedom that is given to the individual. Otherwise, life as a manifest reality has no meaning. No meaning, even creation will have no meaning if there is no freedom. Because what would it mean? It means nothing. Everything is robotic and it's like machines. And therefore, there is, in essence, there is freedom. Even when you look in physics terms and discovering the fine aspects of uncertainty and randomness that is available on the lower levels of existence, then you are actually faced with potentials of random things happening. And what is required is to have higher consciousness to prevent this from happening. So it's a much more complex thing than saying it is consciousness as if it is a God and the creation is maintained by that deity and controls every aspect of it, and therefore God creates the evil and creates the problems. And actually, it was one of my personal search and problem with things is that what is the origin of evil? And nobody could give me a full answer. And I feel that there is an answer, and I present it in this book. It's more complex than just saying this is what it is, but it's based on freedom as part of the most important aspect in the creation. And there is a purpose, in a sense, not a creationist purpose, which means something that is forced on the creation to follow a certain step, and then suddenly there is the deity interferes and creates a problem. It is not on that level. It's on the level of knowledge and experience and freedom. And if you have freedom, you can choose something. And if there is also randomness, there can be random things that can happen. And therefore, there is exposure to potential random issues that are a problem. How to deal with this, then why there is a meaning, how could it be? Well, again, if you have higher consciousness, you can prevent things from happening by being aware of some things to be done and some things not to be done. So there is true responsibility, even for our human species, if this brings us to this point. It is not that, okay, there is a God and everything is going to happen, and what can I do anyway? It's going to happen. It is true responsibility for our human species to come to a certain level of understanding, to raise our awareness and be able to overcome difficulties that might happen. And that's what life has shown, even in the evolution. So this is really what I can say if I have to be brief.
Right. There are quite a few people who asked similar questions. And to be more specific, how can we attain this higher version of consciousness to improve our lives? And what are some of the actionable steps that we can take to attain this? You may have addressed part of it in your talk.
Everything you expose yourself to makes a difference. This is really an important part of what I describe as a bit of consciousness. A bit of consciousness is a moment of awareness. Every moment of awareness changes something in you. It creates a new mode of functioning. So if some things are very benign and not important and don't leave much of an impact, but they may leave something. You see a flower, after you see the flower, you're not the same person. I mean, you're 99.999, etc. % the same person, but there is a little change in your psychology, in your feeling, in your awareness, because you were exposed to something. You go on a vacation, you do something that is positive, you see something good, beautiful music that uplifts you, it changes you a little bit, tiny bit. Whatever you expose yourself to makes a difference in who you are the next moment and the next moment. In order to reach higher consciousness, you have to expose yourself to things that create a pattern of awareness, a pattern of consciousness that is in the direction of acknowledging and recognizing your true self, which is pure consciousness, pure being. That is what is called in the ancient tradition, such as in India, moksha or liberation. You're liberated from the boundaries of experience because you know the self, you experience the self as being unbounded. And the fastest way that this can be done is by directly experience the self, and that is by transcending, which means going beyond the object of experience. And that is why transcendental meditation is not just a stress release, nice technique to feel better, which it is anyway, but its real origin, its real basis is go back to the self, go back to the self, nivartatvam, go back, go back. Go back to the self, experience the self. That is a rested, pure state of being. It purifies the body naturally and spontaneously. That's why the stresses are removed and you feel better. But ultimately what it does, it liberates you from the boundaries of the outer object of experience. So when you look at the flower, you don't become the flower. You look at the table, you don't become the table, and your awareness is taken by the table. You're always established in the self. That's what's called liberation. You are liberated from the boundaries of objects. And that is moksha, that is enlightenment. And there are higher states of enlightenment than just transcendental. That is what we call cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, unity consciousness, where you really see within and outside this one unbounded ocean of consciousness.
Wow. How does it differ from mindfulness?
Mindfulness is a guided way of directing the mind towards certain aspects of experience. The mind is being bombarded by all things. People are stressed, strained, they're worried about everything, and the mind is jumping all over the place. In mindfulness, you say, come, calm down, relax, take it easy. Now put your attention just on your breath so that you are no more bombarded by these thoughts and shaken around. So you have your attention, you are mindful, your mind is full of how the breathing is going. And now you breathe this way, you breathe that way. Or you can be mindful of thoughts. You can feel like I'm mindful of the thoughts. If I feel my feelings are hurt or something, I should observe it and I should say that this is not me, it is just the thought. There are these different techniques where you guide the mind. It's called open monitoring also in a kind of a technical term, which means you monitor things in an open way, in a relaxed way, without judgment. This can help, of course, and it's nice, but it's not transcendence. Transcendence is going beyond this, and transcendence happens naturally, innocently, guided by the own nature of the mind, which is to search for more happiness. But instead of searching more happiness outside, in transcendental meditation, we direct the mind inward. And then, because inward is the true source of intelligence, source of creativity, then the mind wants to go there. And that's why it is a natural process, which is not contrived. Also, if you try to be mindful during activity and you remember to be mindful and like that, you might divide the mind a little bit. And we have seen that some people get anxiety in being in a contrived way in a mindful state. Now, mindfulness is great. I'm not saying it's not good. It's very good and it can help, but it's not transcending. And the best way to be mindful is to be established in the self and then perform action. Yogasta kuru karmani. That is the highest wisdom. Established in the self, in being, in the silent being. Now perform action where you can be mindful because you're not shaken around. You are strong and clear and you can focus, yet maintaining that serenity, that stability. And you are spontaneously, innocently mindful. So to be mindful is great. To be mindful spontaneously is supreme.
Well, I think, God, this could go on for a long time. This is wonderful, the interaction and the discussion that you're having. But in the context of COVID, do you have any thoughts on the impact of consciousness and even controlling COVID? You think about COVID ravaging India, which is where a lot of these Vedic thoughts and beliefs came from, in a country like that is facing a devastation now. Is there a role, in addition to science, to do anything?
Yeah, and it's good to say in addition to science, because we have to resort to what we have and what is available, and we don't just run away from it. But in this case, I'll take the example. To find a solution, you have to have the vision of possibilities that are around, which means to act from the field of consciousness. Because if you are in a dark room and the solution is there somewhere on a table and you are not seeing, so you start checking this, checking that, trying this, trying that, you can't find the solution. And the solution might be something on the surface, ultimately. That's what we say. It's not that we just meditate and forget it. You meditate and you act, and your action, you have to do something. You have to be the instrument of your action, but you want to act in light, not to act in darkness. So if the solution is there on the table, bring the light, you will see it, you will take it, you will use it. So there might be solutions on the surface, but in order to see those solutions and to act with them and to use them, you want to bring the light of knowledge, which is the light of consciousness. Consciousness is awareness, that's all. It's your awareness. What is life without consciousness? Nothing. There is no meaning to it. If you are on anesthesia or in coma, what's the meaning of being wealthy, being healthy, not being anything? You are in coma. It just doesn't mean anything for you. If it's when you are conscious that life gets a meaning. And the more you are aware individually and socially, the better you can find the solutions, which can be on the surface. So it's bringing the light, dispelling the darkness that prevents us from seeing things, and then consciousness, it's awareness. We will be conscious of a broader perspective, broader possibilities, and find the solutions.
Great, thank you. I do have a final question for you. You know the kind of work that we're trying to do, geared towards wellness and good health and so forth. What would be your message to us? What can we do here as part of the CWC to incorporate some of your teachings?
I think we should work hand in hand and teach transcendental meditation to all those who are part of your group. We can have a special program. We can see what the situation is. Maybe even if there is a need, find supporters or sponsors or something like that. And in true faith, in true belief, scientifically, evidence-based, research-based, this is the highest thing that we can do. And then we can just make this knowledge available to the whole world, as we are doing, and as you have been wanting to give wholeness and fullness and true health. It doesn't mean we don't do proper diet, we don't do Ayurveda, we don't do proper, everything has to be done that is on the surface level. But again, let's nourish the root to enjoy the fruit.
Well said. Thank you. And as you might know, there's an extension of the CWC now in India. So there is endless opportunity for this message to go out. Again, I want to thank you, Dr. Nader, for a wonderful, wonderful program. And I want to thank all the panelists, Dr. Kumar, Dr. Vij, and Gopi Kalio for your insightful comments and observations, and Sachin Deshmukh for having brought Dr. Nader to us. So thank you all very much.